We start in the Middle East, where the United States launched multiple airstrikes across Syria late on Sunday night. B-52 bombers, F-15s, and A-10 fighter jets carried out about 140 precision strikes on at least 75 targets belonging to militant groups. Now, Washington said the strikes were carried out to prevent ISIS and other terror groups from exploiting the chaos in the country. The airstrikes came hours after Syrian leader Bashar Al-Assad's regime was toppled by rebel groups. President Joe Biden said he was closely monitoring the developments in the region after the government's collapse.
After 13 years of civil war in Syria, more than half a century of brutal authoritarian rule by Bashar Assad and his father before him, rebel forces have forced Assad to resign his office and flee the country. We're not sure where he is, but there's word that he's in Moscow. At long last, the Assad regime has fallen.
Joining President Biden in echoing the sentiment were America's allies France, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Germany.
I welcome the fact that Assad has gone. The Syrian people had to put up with his brutal regime for far, far too long. We're talking to regional allies. It's very important now that there's a political settlement, a political way forward, and it's very, very important that we emphasise that civilians and minorities must be protected in this process. But very, very pleased that Assad has fallen.
Viele haben nicht nur die Hoffnung, sondern natürlich auch Sorgen.
Syrian President Assad brutally and violently oppressed his own people for more than a decade. He has tens of thousands of lives on his conscience. He has driven millions of people to flee their homes.
In Recht und Ordnung leben kann und dass Recht und Ordnung dort hergestellt werden.
Meanwhile, Israel bombed Syria, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered his tanks to capture disputed land between Israel and Syria in the Golan Heights.
Together with the Minister of Defense and with the full backing of the cabinet, I instructed the IDF yesterday to seize the buffer zone and the commanding positions adjacent to it. We will not allow any hostile force to establish itself on our border. At the same time, we are working to establish a policy of good neighborly relations.
Now, after the White House announced that it struck several targets in Syria, President-elect Donald Trump criticized Vladimir Putin and called him, quote-unquote, weak for not protecting Russia's ally, Syria. However, both Donald Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance said Syria was not the problem of the United States and that Washington should stay out of the region. The fall of Assad's regime is a major blow to Russia and Iran, who both backed the Syrian dictator with weapons and money despite years of anti-government protest. Currently, the ousted Syrian leader has been granted asylum in Moscow after he reportedly struck a deal with Putin as the rebels entered his palace. However, thousands of civilians in Syria took to the streets to mark the end of the Assad regime, which ruled the country with an iron fist for nearly 5 decades.